Okay, so in this video we're going to look at a lot of adverts from the
World where
2020
everything is changing. Some things.
Sorry about that. From the 2020 election campaign for Congress. Now, the better answers in the exam always have a range of good examples of different senators and congressmen to use. What a lot of answers actually do in the exam from students, they usually don't have any examples or just one or two. So it's good to have some nice examples. So these videos are going to show some election adverts and stuff from the election in 2020, mainly for the Senate seats. So the first one we're going to have a look at is what happened or is happening in Maine. Maine is a state that often votes Democratic presidential elections. It has a Republican senator who's reasonably moderate. However, her popularity really fell under the Trump administration because she supported quite a few Trump things. She's usually expressed concern about these things, but then usually voted for them in Congress. So we're going to see a number of adverts. So the first one is from the Republican senator who's up for re-election, who is Senator Susan Collins. So this is one of her adverts.
A world where everything is changing. Some things stay the same. For the 7th year in a row, Susan Collins has been named the most bipartisan U.S. Senator. No matter what party's in the White House or in control of Congress, Susan stays the same, never missing a single vote. Independent experts say Susan is, quote, the gold standard for bipartisanship in the U.S. Congress. That's how Susan Collins gets things done.
I'm Susan Collins, and I've approved this message.
So this advert obviously has the word bipartisan, which means that she supports both sides. It's also portraying her as kind of standing up for Maine or being independent in the state of Maine. However, not everyone agrees with her on this. There's a group of ex-Republicans who set up a group called the Lincoln Project, and they've basically, I suppose like a pressure group really, they've been running adverts against Trump and also against certain Republicans who they are kind of blaming, if you like, or supporting Donald Trump in Congress. So we're going to see one of their adverts which they're running against Susan Collins.
Senator Susan Collins, you aren't doing the job we elected you to do. While Mainers and the American people demand evidence, witnesses, and answers to Trump's corrupt Ukraine scheme, you keep covering for Trump. Oh, sure, you certainly talk a good game. You're concerned, troubled, worried. But one thing you're not? Independent. Madam Senator, this time a finger wag will not cut it. You're a senator, so act like it. You work for Maine, not Mitch McConnell, because Maine demands independence from our leaders. It's something we had with Olympia Snowe and Bill Cohen. Don't embarrass their legacy by protecting corruption. You aren't there to suborn corruption and loyalty to a political party. That's not the Maine way. That's the Trump way. Mainers demand independence, Senator Collins. We want a fair trial in the Senate and honest leadership. So either do your job, Susan Collins, or Maine will find someone who will.
Okay, Sarah Gideon is the main opponent, the Democrat challenger to Susan Collins up in Maine. And here are a selection of her adverts.
That the president has learned from this case.
And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is more deadly. This is 5 per, this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff.
The virus. They're working hard. Looks like by April, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away. I hope that's true. But we're doing great in our country, and I think it's going to all work out fine.
I believe that he will be much more cautious in the future.
He said that the president learned his lessons. Did he learn any lessons?
Okay, here's another Sarah Gideon advert. Before she ran to be US Senator, she was actually the Speaker of the Maine Parliament, the Maine Legislature, so she's obviously quite well known in Maine as it is, hence why she was seen as being a serious challenge for Susan Collins before the whole pandemic thing happened. Anyway, here's another one of her adverts.
Meet Sarah Gideon. She's running to represent us in the Senate. Are you concerned about how much your health care costs? Sarah held Big Pharma accountable and helped pass a law to protect those with pre-existing conditions. Worry about your student loans? Sarah's fighting to lower the cost of college and make education for everyone that wants one. Do you want your senator to put Mainers first? If you want change, vote Sarah Gideon for Senate.
Okay, let's go south now to North Carolina, a more conservative state than Maine. Tom Tillis won the Senate seat off a Democrat 6 years ago. It does have a habit in North Carolina of flipping Senate seats every election, or candidates only winning it by a couple of percentage points. It's also, as you should know already, a swing state in the election for president this year as well. Okay, so this is the Lincoln Project, those group of Republicans who don't like Trump running an advert against Tom Tillis.
Man who sits silently while Donald Trump cut funds for education, cuts that will put North Carolina kids further behind. What do you call a man who won't speak out against atrocities at the border, who watches as children are torn from their mother's arms and locked in cages? What do you call a man who supports Trump's record cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and disability? Cuts that will devastate North Carolina seniors and harm North Carolina families. What do you call a man who doesn't just accept Trump's corruption, doesn't just dismiss his criminality and addiction to foreign influence, but votes for it, applauds it? What do you call a man like this? You call him Tom Tillis. There are many other things Tom Tillis deserves to be called, but senator is not one of them.
Okay, now let's look at an actual advert from Tom Tillis himself. Okay, so here goes.
Sacrificing to protect our way of life. For Tom Tillis, serving the needs of our nation's heroes is a top priority. That's why Tillis co-sponsored the BRAVE Act, bipartisan legislation that helps create more and better jobs for our veterans, giving them new opportunities and more ways to provide for their families. Call Tom Tillis and ask him to keep fighting for our veterans and their future.
Tom Tillis' opponent is a man called Cal Cunningham, who is actually, the opinion polls have him slightly ahead or about equal with Tom Tillis. Let's have a look at one of his adverts, which he's currently been running in North Carolina.
I always wanted to serve. I was a state senator, focused on jobs. Then 9/11 happened. I volunteered for the Army Reserves and was sent to Iraq as a prosecutor. You never forget the day you ship out. I'm Cal Cunningham, and I made it back to my wife and kids. Now I'm running for U.S. Senate to fight a different kind of war, against unfair trade deals with China and tax giveaways that send North Carolina jobs overseas. I approve this message for them.
Now, what's happened in the last week in North Carolina is the Democrat challenger, Cal Cunningham, it was found out he'd been sending text messages of sexual nature to a woman that wasn't his wife. So as a consequence, Tom Tillis obviously been attacking Cal Cunningham, and here's one of the adverts he's been running against him.
We've reached out to Cunningham's camp for 4 straight days now to set up an interview with no answer.
Cunningham's campaign once again did not respond to questions Tuesday.
WXII, including myself, have reached out to Cal Cunningham for an interview. We have yet to hear back from him. We also do know that Cunningham dropped out of a virtual town hall.
We are still waiting to hear from Tillis' opponent, Democrat Cal Cunningham. We don't know when his next media availability will be. Cunningham has canceled campaign events and largely avoided the public. When I asked him about this Wednesday, he declined to talk talk about details. Cal Cunningham was scheduled to do a Facebook town hall today at 3:30, but he backed out of that event, and we have not really heard from him.
Cal Cunningham facing questions but providing few answers.
Several requests to interview Cal Cunningham. So far, his campaign has not yet agreed.
We have been reaching out to the Cunningham campaign, constantly asking when his next media availability is or if we can get an interview with the candidate, but we have not heard back on a set time or day. Back to you.
All right, Joe, I know you'll keep pushing until you get him on camera. Now, I've reached out to Cal Cunningham's campaign multiple times over the last few days asking for an interview with Cal Cunningham, but those requests either were denied or went unanswered. Clearly, that campaign is in crisis management.
Because here in North Carolina, the truth still matters.
And a very quick move across the country to Arizona, as we know another state which is a close one for the presidential election. It's also looking like a close one for the Senate as well. Here you've got the sitting Republican Senator Martha McSally, who basically kind of got the seat following the death of John McCain, so she's up for election this time, up against Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly is the husband of a former representative from Arizona who was shot in the head and survived about 10 years ago. He's also a former astronaut as well. Most opinion polls seem to have him ahead. Anyway, Martha McSally ran this attack advert against him. I can only find it in this report on a wider broadcast, so let's have a look at this.
Here's hype man Mark Kelly pitching products in China.
Former astronaut Mark Kelly taking some heat.
Kelly's personal business is part owned by a Chinese firm called an arm of the Chinese Communist Party.
Senator Martha McSally and her Republican allies claim Kelly's personal business is connected to China's Communist Party. Let's examine those claims.
We're going to give people the opportunity to see the planet like I got to see it as an astronaut.
The business is too...
Okay, sorry about that. I've actually found the proper advert, so let's watch the proper advert as opposed to that bit from that TV show.
Here's hype man Mark Kelly pitching products in China. Kelly's personal business is part owned by a Chinese firm called an arm of the Chinese Communist Party. Now Mark Kelly is deflecting, covering for China on COVID. The same Mark Kelly flying the Chinese flag on his motorcycle. The Chinese government lied. Lives lost, dreams shattered. Mark Kelly, he's just too connected to China. NRSC is responsible for the contest.
Kelly's trying to use his fame to get elected. He's already used his fame to get rich. From China. Kelly got paid to advise a company partnered with China, mired in a global security threat. Another Kelly company took Chinese money, an undisclosed sum from a Chinese firm accused of espionage. The press warned China could be secretly gathering information using companies like Kelly's. Mark Kelly doesn't stop. He just gets paid. NRSC is responsible for the content of...
Okay, and now we'll watch one final advert, this time from Mr. Mark Kelly himself.
Arizonans know that Martha McSally will say anything to get elected. Her false attacks against me were desperate and over the top. Now she's doing the same to Mark Kelly. But Martha's worst lies are the ones about her own record. She voted to eliminate protections for pre-existing health conditions. An Arizona senator should independent voice that puts everyday people first. That's why I support Mark.
I'm Mark Kelly, and I approve this message.
Okay, I hope you found those interesting and useful. There's a little tiny table in the booklet actually on the stuff about congressional elections, about what sort of things they campaign on. Might be worth having a look at. It is noticeable how in this election cycle there's so much which seems to be centred on national issues, mainly anti-Trump or pro-Trump depending on the party, and not a huge amount actually about the state issues themselves, which is slightly unusual for congressional elections.